Okay, class. This is my aluminum foil sculpture of someone skateboarding with their hair flying in the air. Obviously, they're flying, they're going this way, so their hair's flying that way. You see that? Okay. I've done it with wire and foil, and I've taped on the bottom the pieces of wire that bend on the bottom. So now I'm ready to add something that will make it stronger and harder. And in this case, we're going to use plaster craft. This is what it looks like. It's like cloth with big spaces in between, like a lace almost. And the stuff that's stuck on there, I don't know if you can see it or not, stuff that's stuck on there is plaster. When you get it wet, it makes a nice like white goopy texture on your cloth, and then you can wrap it around and around the body. But first we need to cut it up into narrow strips. I'll make some wider than others. So I've got some wide, some narrow, a little bit of both to just grab more. Okay, and this part right here, you can see how there's no plaster on that end. See the difference? We got, so that part I would cut off and I wouldn't use that part. Okay, now some of these strips I'm going to cut into small pieces just in case I need something like that. Just a few of them. So I've got like 4 or 5 little squares there, about that size. Okay, now we have a dish with water in it, and this has been used before for plaster, and in the bottom there's hard plaster, but you just ignore that and we'll use it as is. So I'll start out with something easy like the arms, and I go ahead and I dip that into the water, get it good and wet, both sides, and then I go like this, and I start to soften up that dry plaster that's now wet. And now you can see it gets on my fingers, and that's okay, that washes off, no biggie. Let's put that on our sculpture. Start with one end, maybe up by the shoulder, and wrap it around the arm. And put it on pretty tight. Now you may recognize this stuff. It's similar to what they use when you have a broken arm or a broken leg. They will wrap this around and around to make the cast. You can see I started to wrap that arm. Okay, and I'm going to continue. Go ahead and overlap on top of what you've already started to wrap. And you're just pulling it in that direction towards the hand. It's starting to get stuck together. Okay, keep on wrapping it around and continuing. And you'll see on the back, you see how I've been very careful not to leave any hanging down. Everything's stuck on nicely. There's no air bubbles and there's no hanging pieces. And I can continue on the leg here. Okay, so here's a tricky spot. Putting the plaster up and into these little nooks and crannies, like where the ears would be on that, is tricky. Okay, so you take a tiny thin strip, really thin, and kind of go like this underneath the hair. Okay, and push it in there. See that? Drape it over and get any air bubbles out. Okay, now for the tricky part, the hair. So I started to put a piece of plaster on the foil for the hair. So I'm about to let it dry, and eventually lots more layers of plaster cloth and even like liquid plaster can be put on. You can see I've got plaster cloth on most of it. I might have missed a spot right way under there. I can get that later though. Once this dries, it'll be nice and hard. Not like rock hard, but a lot better than it is right now. Just want to make sure that I don't leave anything sticking up. That all my cloth is like stuck on. Okay, I'll take a look at it on all sides. I mean, that little string I can cut off later. Don't try to do it now. It looks pretty good. I don't have anything major hanging down that I'll regret later. So once this gets hard, there'll be more to the video. Okay? Okay, so here we are, day 2 on our sculpture. We're going to add more plaster cloth on. It's nice and stiff. So I'll go ahead and with some more strips. Smear and smooth. A second layer makes it even stronger. And then later on, if you're worried about all these little holes and these little bumps and things, no worries. Later on, the third step of the plaster process is to mix up some liquid plaster and sort of goop it on with your fingers and let it dry, harden up. It's really a chemical process when the plaster starts to cure, C-U-R-E, curing the plaster. When the plaster starts to cure, there's a chemical reaction that happens. And the plaster itself starts to feel warm to the touch. If you've ever had a cast put on and they did use the traditional plaster instead of the brightly colored fiberglass stuff, you would have noticed that your arm or your leg that was underneath the cast started to feel warm. And that, again, is the reaction of the plaster doing what it's supposed to do, curing and becoming hard. It warms up. Okay, so my sculpture's pretty dry now, and this is probably, if I were doing it in class, in a half-hour art class, this is probably, at least 2 art classes of putting the plaster cloth on. Now I'm going to do some thinking about what I'd like to do next. I'd like the hair to look a little bit more realistic. Right now it looks like this big flapping thing. So, okay, I just learned a very good lesson. And if you want to try to cut it at this point, it's not going to work very well. So if you're doing something that flaps in the air, like hair or some clothing, or if you're doing a ballerina and her tutu is moving or something, get it in the position you want it to be in before you add the plaster cloth. And then put the plaster cloth on top of the foil that's showing the movement that you want. The only way I'm going to be able to get the hair to do what I want it to is to maybe add some new pieces of plaster on top and that go out and come to a point and are flapping in the breeze, like hair moving. So that's what I'll do next. So another long strip that I smear, and then I will fold it in half lengthwise to resemble a long skinny piece. And I'll put it on top of the existing hair, smoothing it in so that it looks like it belongs on there. And then when I get out onto one of those little triangles that I've cut out, then I will form it special. So I'm kind of folding it over and twisting it so that it looks like long little pieces of hair hanging off. Does that make sense? So you can see that. So I need to do it 1, 2, 3 more times on the hair, and maybe over here on the bangs too. Here's something that works pretty well. You take a strip and cut it through the middle, you know, right there, but not all the way. And then go ahead and put it on to the existing hair. Smooth it in so it's attached. And then those two pieces can kind of, you put them on top of each other like that, and it looks like hair. If it's hanging off a little too much, you could do something like this. You could have it flat back and get stuck. Ooh, that looks cool. Look at that. It's like a little wave of hair that flaps back. You see that? Right there. Okay, so here's an interesting dilemma. I'm trying to get the t-shirt, the sleeve of the t-shirt, to flap in the wind like the hair does. So I'm holding it up with a scissors. But I need to, you know, have my hands free. So I'm going to stick a roll of just a wad of paper underneath there that will hold it up in place until it gets hard. And then I can take the paper out. There we go. Now carefully pull the scissors out and put the paper in instead. So now if you can see, the sleeve is flapping away from the arm. And when that dries, I'll pull that paper out or I'll cut it off, and it will work. I've also got my shorts kind of flapping here as well. See that? Right there. And the other part right here that's flapping in the wind. So everything is going that way because of the wind. Okay? Everything's going that way. The hair, the sleeve, and the shorts are all flapping in the wind because my skateboarder's going fast down the hill. And the skateboarder's looking down the hill towards where they're going, like a smart skateboarder. No collisions, please.